Hi, guys, and welcome back. Today, I wanted to do a quick review of WorldCon 76 2018, the one that just happened in San Jose. In fact, I think probably today's the last day that it's running, but I have to be at work. So I'm actually at work. I'm filming at work. Um, and yes, so you can tell the surroundings a little bit different. Okay, so this was my first WorldCon I've ever gone to, and it's going to be from a perspective of somebody who's never been to WorldCon, who's not like a constant goer, obviously. And so take that, keep that in mind as I critique it. Now, overall, I did like it, but there are some things that I liked more and some things that I liked less. Okay, and this isn't really scripted, so you know, bear with me as I kind of process the whole thing. Okay, so I went to WorldCon for 2.5 days. I wasn't there the entire time. That's another thing you should keep in mind. Um, I went there for all of Friday, sorry, all of Thursday, half a day Friday in the morning, and then Sunday. I skipped Saturday because, again, I had to work. And the beauty of WorldCon this year is that it's in the Bay Area, and I was able to, you know, not take any time off work and just kind of squeeze it into my days off. Okay, so the thing that I really liked about it is the panels. Some of the panels were very, very useful to me personally. There was a panel that I went to on day one that was about fighting, how to write fighting, and that's my that's my struggle. I mean, I do have some Tai Chi and Qigong training, so and I have had some basic self-defense instruction. So, and I have friends who practice jujitsu. So I do know some martial arts. I know some basics, but it's still very hard for me to write an entire fighting scene. So I really enjoyed that panel because every single panelist was a writer and had a black belt in one thing or another. And then there was another panel that I really liked. This was also on Thursday. It was on fencing. Again, something very specific, something I have zero experience with outside of watching The Three Musketeers, which doesn't count. So, and it was about fencing and about historical battle wounds and injuries. So that was really, really helpful as well for somebody who writes history and likes history and will probably continue writing history. So again, very useful to me. Then, so those panels were very cool. They were on Thursday. And then on Sunday, another very, very useful panel to me was one on horses. I've ridden on horseback a little bit. Again, I'm by no means a professional. I don't know. I know how it feels to be riding on a horse. That's about it. Because every time I've been riding a horse, there was an instructor there who dumbed it down and watered it down so that somebody like me could actually ride. So again, I don't know much about horses, and that was very useful to me because, again, it was very information specific, very subject specific, and the information was very useful. So I was writing like mad. I felt like I was at a university lecture, so I was taking all the notes down. So some of the panels were very, very useful. Another thing that I really liked was I really liked I'm an acupuncturist, right? So I really loved the Tai Chi that they had in the morning, which I actually didn't go to any of the Tai Chi classes, unfortunately, because they were too early and I was still driving down because it took me about 45 minutes to get to the conference. But I just really like that they had that. I love Tai Chi, and every time I would come to the conference, I'd see this huge class of Tai Chi students, which I thought was really cool. And then the other thing that I really liked is the authors that they had. Now, I posted on social media that I got to see George R.R. Martin. And that was really cool because they talked about Night Flyers, the new sci-fi show, which is based on his novella. That was really neat. And unfortunately, on the day that I wasn't there, on Saturday, Brandon Sanderson was on one of the panels, which I was really sad to miss. I wish I was there, but c'est la vie, that's life. I had to be at work. So, and then they had a plethora of other great writers. Those were just like the celebrity ones. And so that was really cool. And in general, I think the amount of writers that they had that were writing such different, I mean, it was all sci-fi and fantasy, right? But it was such different subgenres of every one of those that was really unique to listen to all the perspectives. That's what I like. They had somebody writing horror, they had somebody writing YA and adult, and space operas, and steampunk, and just there's dystopia, and there was a lot, and that was really, really neat. Oh, speaking of dystopia, one other panel that I liked that I got some information from was on the dystopian future and how food could potentially look like with the technology that's progressing, and how we could modify food, and how we can grow meat in a petri dish. And that was also very specific, very cool, and very scientific. Okay, so those are the things that I really liked. The things that I did not like so much, again, as somebody who was going for the first time, is I was not crazy about the fact that it felt a little cliquey. There were a lot of people there that have been going since, I mean, the 70s, the 80s, the whatevers. This is like their 20th, I don't know, they had, 20th WorldCon or whatever. There were a lot of people there that have bonded and who've made all these relationships. So I was just by myself, and I don't blame anybody for being cliquey, but I'm just saying that these people have been going to this conference for a really long time. They've bonded together. And if you go, just keep that in mind, and either be prepared to be kind of like a little loner, or be prepared to be very friendly and just like bulldozer your way into some relationships, friendships, or, just bring a friend along. That's probably the easiest solution. But yeah, it was definitely a little bit hard to break into some of the circles because they've just been established for so long. And another thing that I didn't like is some of the panels that were not subject specific were a little bit kind of wishy-washy. They weren't as useful as I thought they would be. But I don't think that that's really the fault of the conference organizers. I think that's just kind of sometimes how the panels go, or maybe sometimes how, I don't know, the panelists explain the information. Maybe it's not just so specific. Like, for example, I went to a panel on the difference between YA and adult. And as somebody who writes on this crossover genre line, where my characters sometimes tend to be like older teens, young adults kind of thing, I really wanted to hear like a really good distinction so I could keep that in mind when I write. But instead it was very like fluid and very difficult to pinpoint as to what they were saying. So for example, one would say, oh, it's the pacing. YA has to be super fast paced because teens don't have a lot of time right now. And then somebody who writes adults like, well, that's what I have to keep in mind too, because adults don't have a lot of time. Adults have social media. Adults do all this too. So then somebody would say, oh, it's the content. You want to make sure that you're not super explicit in like sex scenes or something. And then somebody would turn that around and be like, well, I was a teacher for blah blah years, and the things that I overheard these teens talking about is just as explicit as what you'd expect. So it's very like, you couldn't really place the difference. At the end of it, I walked away going, oh, there's almost no difference. It's like a feeling that you get, I mean, I think probably the best explanation was that a YA is more filtered through one person's subjective experience of a whatever the storyline is, as opposed to an adult could take several several perspectives and would be a little more grand, and they would involve politics of the world and all these things that you technically don't involve in like a YA perspective. Granted, of course, somebody raised their hand and said, well, there are multi-perspective um, novels that are YA as well. So take it or leave it. I think it probably, it's a tough subject. So I can't really blame the panelists, but that was just an example. There were a few other panels, like I went to one on prose, and that was kind of not as useful either. And of course, it could also just be not as useful for me, and maybe it was very useful for somebody else. So there you go. So anyways, that's one of the things that I wasn't crazy about. And another thing that I wasn't crazy about, and this also has nothing to do with the organizers of the conference, because they don't have control over this either. But the one thing that I was really not a fan of is that, and I will preface this with saying that I'm an acupuncturist and I am an advocate of healthy lifestyles, but there was such an immense amount of people there who were unfortunately with walkers and canes, who were young, they weren't old. And you could just, they even had a panel on the opioid crisis. And at first I couldn't understand when I was reading the schedule. I didn't understand why there was a panel, an entire panel on the opioid crisis. And then when I went to the conference, I realized that it must be because there are so many people who attend this conference who are ill or in pain, obviously in pain at least, because they're on, in walkers or wheelchairs or those not bikes, what are they called? Scooters, because they can't walk. And I mean, I treat that in my practice, people who are unfortunately disabled because of pain, because of something happening in their back, because of a pinched nerve or disc or herniated disc or whatever is happening. So clearly, if they had to include a panel on the opioid crisis and truth and fiction and all that, and I saw so many people with walkers, it just made me realize how I think the reading community, or at least definitely the older reading community, tends to really do a great job of exercising their mind with the books that they read and perhaps even write, and not such a great job of exercising their body. And I think that it's really unfortunate. So as somebody who loves to read, who loves to write, I encourage everybody that you can cut out some time for your life and do some exercises, and do them preventatively. Like, don't wait until you have to have a walker or a cane. Don't wait until you're in pain. Like, start doing them now, especially if you're young and you're not an athlete of any sort, or you don't like sports. I mean, it's not about liking sports. It's about preserving your health so that you can enjoy a pain-free life later, and you can leave more room to enjoy books because you'll be more comfortable, right? Reading comfortably. So this is not like a criticism of the actual organization of the conference, because it has nothing to do with that. It's just the community itself. So I think that it just made me sad a little bit, being around it, and made me realize that people, like I said, concentrate on exercising one part of themselves, but not so much on the other. And I encourage people to really pay attention to that, because it's so important. It's important for your own happiness and health, and it's important for societal happiness and health, right? Happier people create happier societies. So those are the pros and cons. I guess I listed 3 pros and 3 cons, but really it's not really pros and cons. It's just my subjective opinion. So, all right, that's it. Oh, and I did want to say, I would encourage everybody to at least go to one WorldCon, just to get a feel for it, understand what it's like, go to some panels, and really create your own opinion, because your experience could be different from my experience. And Would I go again to another WorldCon? I think I would, depending on the panels. Like if I were to list through the panels and I found some subjects and topics that I really felt like could enhance my craft, I would definitely go. Also, if there are any writers that I want to meet that are on these panels, I would definitely go. And also depending on how much it is, because right now it's great because it's only a 45-minute drive for me, so it would be a sin not to go. So I decided to go. If I have to pay thousands of dollars to fly to Finland for WorldCon like it was last year, I don't think it's going to be in Finland again for a while. No, I wouldn't go. But yeah, I think it just depends on what the panels are and the cost of the conference. So that's it, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this brief critique of the conference, and see you guys next time. Take care.